is يباشر تباشر معرفته بالله قلبه, that his awareness of Allah is something that's impacting his heart. And it might not be somebody who knows very much outward knowledge. And this is very important because many of the Sahaba were of this ilk. In other words, many of the Sahaba were not scholars. They were actually very simple people but because their iman was so strong and their knowledge of Allah was so powerful, that they were ulama of this deep knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and yet they were not people of fatwa, they were not people of even memorizing the whole Quran or knowing many hadiths. Many of the Sahaba, the actual people that gave fatwa from the Sahaba, are less than 10. I mean, this is a historical fact. They were only a handful of the Sahaba that were really giving fatwa. And most of them really didn't want to because they had such taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, I really think it's important that we don't envision that, if you're not a scholar, that's it, you're cut off from. On the contrary, there are many very simple Muslims that their iman is so strong, these people are in a much better state than people that know many riwayah and all of these words and things like that, and in the end of the day, really, it doesn't benefit them. Now, the best one and the highest one, according to Ibn Rajab, is the one who knows Allah and who knows the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the Prophet ﷺ loved that things were beneficial. That, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُؤْمِنَ الْقَوِيِّ وَالْمُؤْمِنَ الْقَوِيِّ أَحَبُّ إِلَى اللَّهِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنَ الضَّعِيفِ. The strong mu'min is more beloved to Allah than the weak mu'min. وَفِي كُلٍّ خَيْرٍ, but in all of them is good. So the strong mu'min is the one who, in terms intellectually, has a lot of knowledge and also benefits other people, but he's also being benefited by his knowledge. And so a weaker mu'min would be somebody who maybe has less knowledge and these type of things, but still, in both of them is good. Now, in terms of this whole aspect of learning these outward knowledges is extremely important. But at the same time, it should not be at the neglect of this tazkiyah that should be taking place. And traditionally, what would happen is, because people were studying with people that really had a lot of purification themselves, that this would affect these people in a very profound and deep way. And through the process of spending time with these people, they would literally themselves become people of tazkiyah. And unfortunately, in our Islamic ummah, the teachers and the scholars of Islam were really so tortured and attacked and opposed, especially during the colonial period, that I mean, you can read I read in Turkey that in 1923 there were 17 shuyukh that were hung in one village. What took place in Morocco under Governor Louti, this fanatical French governor, who literally went and killed many, many teachers of Islam. And this was happening all over the Muslim Ummah. And then the next thing that took place was the dismantling of the Islamic madrasa and university system, which these systems were producing human beings of great caliber. Well, those things were literally dismantled. So we find ourselves in a very precarious situation, because not only do we have very few people that are really well established and well grounded in the Islamic sciences, but also we have very few people that have gone through this serious training in which they can lead, they can take positions of qiyada. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu said, تَفَقَّهُ قَبْلَ أَن تَسُودُوا, that you should be people of understanding before you get into positions of authority. And what happens in many situations is many of us are put into positions of authority really before we're prepared for that. And I would certainly put myself and many other people in that category, because this is a tragedy in the Islamic Ummah. So, in these two aspects of the Islamic movement, which is one, the revivification or revival of the Islamic sciences and knowledges. Now, the Islamic sciences really are very well known. They're categorized and they're classified. And they're classified between what are called fara'id kifaya, fara'id al-ayn, or individual responsibility, collective responsibility. There is an obligation on all of us to learn the ayn. all of us have this individual responsibility. And these things really are not learned on a weekend seminar. There are things that take serious study by all of us, and unfortunately, if we did not get it as children, then we must learn it as adults. I mean, the best and ideal situation is that a parent will give the child what it needs in terms of the prerequisite knowledges of Islam. But if they're not given these knowledges and they reach into adulthood and they find that they're in a state of ignorance, it becomes incumbent upon them as a mukallaf, as somebody who is responsible, to seek that knowledge. And we know also that knowledge, according to Islam, is from the cradle to the grave. It literally is, min al-mahdi ila lahdi, from the cradle to the grave. And we have many traditions of scholars. Ibn Yusuf radiallahu anhu, who on his deathbed was learning some masail fiqhiyah. And it wasn't because he needed them in this life. He literally wanted to increase his knowledge, because Allah يَرْفَعَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. Allah raises up those who believe and those who have been given knowledge by degrees. So the more knowledge, the more iman one has, the higher their degree is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is how these people look. They were learning knowledge not for their own selves, not for self-aggrandizement, not to display their knowledge, not to be impressive in front of people, not so that tusharu ilayhi birbanan, like they say, like people pointing and, oh, look at that one and what knowledge he has. This is all illusion. Like Khalil ibn Ishaq, when he Khalil ibn Ahmad radiallahu anhu, who wrote the science of arud, which is prosody, and really a brilliant scholar and grammarian. Somebody saw him after he died in a dream, and he said, where were all those knowledges that, because Khalil asked Allah to give him a knowledge nobody else had before him, and he was inspired to put down the science of the metric versification in poetry, what are called the abhar in Arabic, of lines of poetry. And he did this. And so this man asked him in his dream, what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do with all those knowledges? How did they benefit you? He said, وَجَدْتُهَا هَبَاءً مَنْثُورًا. I found they're just nothing. All the arud, the nahw, the sarf, all these things that I learned, هَبَاءً مَنْثُورًا. And like al-Junayd al-Baghdadi said, somebody saw him after he died in a dream, and he asked him, and he said, ذهبت تلك الإشارات وافتنت تلك العبارات ولم تفيدنا إلا ركيعات كنا نؤديها في جوف الليل. All those fine things we were saying, they're all gone. And all of those wonderful articulations, they disappeared. And the only thing that benefited us was some little rakats we were doing in the middle of the night. You see, so I mean, all of the knowledge, once the human being dies, really, it's haba'an manthura. You know, the sadaqah jariyah, which benefits us, are those things, those books that people leave behind, and these things where people benefit if they were placed for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. I mean, there's a great scholar in Tunisia, Asad ibn Furat, radiallahu anhu. He was a really great scholar, and he wrote a book in which he collected most of the traditions of Imam Malik radiallahu anhu. And this man, when he went back to Tunis, there was another man, Sahnun, who wrote the Mudawwan al-Kubra, which he took from Ibn al-Qasim radiallahu anhu. And the scholars of Tunis asked Asad ibn Furat to look at the book of Sahnun and to measure it against his, which was called the Asadiyah. And Asad ibn al-Furat said, why do you need his book when you have my book? Now, that's zalla, you know, with all respect to the Imam, because he was a great scholar and Imam. But the point that he said that his book was left by the Muslim scholars. I mean, his book literally, even though it's there and it's looked at by certain scholars, the Mudawwana of Sahnun is the book in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the tawfiq. And this is very fascinating. There are literally hundreds of arba'inat, the collections of arba'in hadith, hundreds. You can see so many ulama wrote it because of the hadith about arba'in. You know, man hafidha arba'ina min hadithi, he enters into Jannah fi zumrat al-fuqaha. It's a weak hadith that Imam Nawawi mentions at the beginning of the book, but because of the hadith, many people wrote the arba'in. Why is it that when we say al-arba'in, everybody knows Imam al-Nawawi? I mean, why is that Allah gave this Imam tawfiq in his arba'in in a way that no other Imam was given? And really, Imam Nawawi has an amazing maqam in this ummah, because all of his books have complete acceptance. And really the way that's understood is the degree of ikhlas of this imam.